This panel is going to be discussing, as we've just heard, the lessons in terms of building the sports industry and really the intersection between the business of sport, investing in sport, and regulation. That's what we're going to try and focus on today with a great panel of speakers. I'm going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves as they answer the first question with their background. I'm going to start with Mickey Stewart, who's done business for many years here in Saudi, in sport. Can you tell us a bit about the landscape of business, in particular in sport, investing in Saudi?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. Morning, everybody. So I'm Mickey Stewart. I'm the Deputy CEO of Arabian Enterprise Incubators. We've been based in Riyadh for 13 years. We're exclusive to Saudi, and I've been living here for 4 years. A momentous day today. I came to CAFT on the metro, and it worked really well. So good news. In terms of, so I'm sort of a guest in the country. Like, clearly, Rasha is a national. So I'm give it a view from an expat perspective and a business perspective. Our role in AEI is to help international businesses invest in the kingdom, do a soft landing, and perhaps I'll look at it through the question about the business landscape and the market from a few different perspectives. My own personal perspective as an expat here, I'm a lover of sport, a huge passion for it. My own particular, I'm saying this at a football summit, my own particular passion is for rugby, sailing and tennis, and will indulge in those sports whenever I can. And as I've been privileged to be able to see the America's Cup up in Jeddah. I've been to watch the men's and the ladies' tennis and watch Coco Gauff win the WTA final recently here in Riyadh. It was actually, I got here to the World Football Summit by virtue of sitting next to Jan Lesi at the inaugural Rugby Sevens tournament here in Riyadh about 6 weeks ago. And it's just incredible as an expat who's been witnessing this transformation take place in the kingdom, to see what's on offer as a sports lover and eventually hopefully a participant in various things, golf and so on. So the opportunity here is phenomenal to see it as a spectator. So looking through the vision of the prism of fans and fan participation, we've heard today a renaissance being used, a renaissance in sport in the kingdom, the transformation being spoken about and so on. Fan participation here it's on the march. I mean, traditionally it has been football, but of the, I think, either 93 or 95 sports federations that exist, there is sport for everybody, and fan participation is growing immeasurably here, and the fan engagement. And one shouldn't underestimate, although this is a transformation taking place, this population of 36 million people in the kingdom, of which 80% are under the age of 35. This is an incredibly young population who are engaged in social media and so on. So although it might be new physically to see it in front of them, they've been following sport for years. So fan engagement, their expectations of what to see is incredible. Sitting as a fan myself alongside young Saudis, particularly, for example, at the rugby, where the youth team, both male and female youth teams, were supporting the senior teams, it's an explosion of interest and enthusiasm and support through these grassroots sports as they grow up. So those young fans watching are then going out to then play on the field, and watching Coco Gauff and others play the empowerment for young female tennis players is incredible. From actual participation, the sort of third prism, the engagement through actual participation of young Saudis through the Saudi Games, which literally you choose a sport, you can go out on the field and you can play as a young Saudi, and you could find yourself very quickly representing the national team in that particular sport, and that is a route to market for an athlete. Again, an incredible way to do that, and phenomenal, and the sort of level of support behind that in terms of capital and infrastructure is growing day by day. And then really the penultimate prism I want to look at is or just refer to is the supply chain, so for foreign investors. I hope that sort of builds a little foundation of participants and fans. At AEI, we support the supply chain, and we've got about 25 to 30 international businesses now who are dealing with everything from infrastructure to consultancy to data management to dealing with fans, to activation of events, logistics, all these sorts of things. And it is extraordinary the level of opportunity here for foreign investors coming into the kingdom to support sport, from up in the north with NEOM, East Coast, as I mentioned, where West Coast, America's Cup on the Red Sea, down in Dammam where the Rugby Sevens was taking place recently, down south in Abha in Jebel Souda on the mountains up there for adventurous types. The level of opportunity for foreign investors in the kingdom is phenomenal. And then the last element really is just in terms of the marketplace and business is the government. Clearly PIF driving things forward and underpinning what's been set out with Vision 2030. But we've seen a sort of slight move away from or sort of recalibration from the state and opening up opportunities for the private sector now. And there's no shortage of sort of entrepreneurial spirit and enthusiasm and indeed capital that's out there for private business, local business to get involved, and huge opportunity for international investors to partner locally with young Saudi businesses and startups, as well as some well-established family offices and others. So the infrastructure that's been put into place by government is now happening. The metro turning on today being an example. But the hard stop of what inevitably will be World Cup 2034 being here in Riyadh, that's a demonstrable hard stop that Saudi will be delivering for. And this sort of runway in is going to be an incredible journey. I'm delighted to be here. It's a privilege to be here and to support international investors and, of course, local partners here in the kingdom. Huge opportunity.
Thank you. And in a nutshell, Mickey, what are the main regulatory challenges that foreign investors may face here?
So it's excuse the pun, it is sort of shifting sands in the kingdom from a regulatory perspective. There are changes that have taken place, positive changes that have taken place recently from the various ministries and regulators who have recognised the importance of foreign direct investment. So companies law, civil transactions law, labour law have all changed recently in the last 12 months or so, maybe slightly longer for some of those, making the route to market slightly easier and lifting some barriers. Most recently, foreign investment law is going to change, where a foreign investor hitherto requires a license, whatever that license may be, service, industrial, whatever it may be. That's now changing again to be more of a registration process with Ministry of Investment. But there is still a lot of steps and processes to go through. And foreign direct investment has been slightly flat for the last 2 quarters. There's a target by the end of 2030 for it to be 100 billion a year. The target for this year, I think, is 27 billion US. So these changes that are taking place are designed to encourage investors to come in and make things easier. E-government here works incredibly well. But I think, to finish the answer, take advice from local people on the ground who have tactical, practical experience. It's easy when you know how. It's not when you don't. It really is. It can be quite complex. But once you've got all the sort of the jigsaw pieces in place, there is a critical path as a foreign investor that you can get onto, and you should be going quite nicely along that path.
Thanks. I'm not sure if we'll have questions at the end here. If we have time, we will. But if anyone's got any questions about that, I'm sure they can find you later as well.
Of course. Yeah.
Looking at it, Pedro Garza from Club America, the football club in Mexico, looking at it from a different point of view. Just for a start, why, if you've got a football club in Mexico, why do you need to be looking at markets outside Mexico? What's the purpose for a football club in doing that?
Okay, thanks, Nick. Well, first off, to answer that question, I'd rather start how you see all European big clubs and not so big clubs too have been going for many years to the United States, right? Trying to target that market and open that market and tap into that market. And the thing is, you're always told, and I heard Stacey Williams the other day from the Kansas City Chiefs NFL, saying that you should go to it should be a no-brainer, right, to choose on which market to expand. You should go where you naturally should go, where you're already global, right? There should be different indicators on where you need to go, whether if you're like the Kansas City Chiefs, an American market, you should go to countries and cities where there are maybe a lot of expats, or where you know the NFL is being watched already. And that's what we've been doing in the United States, right? Club America is the biggest club in Mexico. It's really big in the Americas, and it's huge in the United States. It's got 15 million declared fans. I heard you said there was 36 million people in Saudi. There's 37 million Mexicans and sons of Mexicans in the US. So that's our obvious market. That's a natural market. But what do you do when the market's not natural, right? You want to expand. You can't just limit yourself to where you're already big. And going to these offshore markets, and this being a first exercise for the club, it's this need to create the brand exposure and fan base growth that we're looking for. The obvious questions, the obvious answer would probably be to not go where the market's not natural, but we can't limit ourselves to that. So the objective here is to grow, and I think the first step is kind of showcasing the club in the business part. So if there's business interest and business opportunities, then you can start exploring the other part, right? But for starters, that's what Club America is looking for here in Saudi.
And really 2 follow-up questions from that on both sides. First, what do you see your club has that may be of interest to the Saudi and the broader Asian market? And secondly, what do you think is important and exciting about this market?
First, I think that Mexican and Saudi culture are similar in a way, and especially going into the football part. And I think Rasha will have something to pitch in here. But I think in Mexico, it's a very unequal distribution of money in general. And but what you can always find as someone living in Mexico is a football pitch. You'll always have that. You can start playing football with nothing, right? The passion it generates and the culture it generates from the start. It's a 130 million country where almost 80% of the people play football, amateur of course. But I think that culture and the similarity to Saudi is something that links. And what I think the club can offer if coming here to Saudi is the whole other market we already have in Mexico and the United States. Because everything Saudi is building here through sport, and that they're trying to build progress through sport, also has to be showcased to the rest of the world. And these allies that can showcase that and have already strong following fan bases and strong watchers in other regions I think, are of interest to anyone who wants to keep on doing that. So Club America can offer that not only in Mexico, but also in the United States. What was the second part of the question? Just to
the importance, or what's interesting to you about this market, the wider Asian market generally, and Saudi Arabia in particular?
So I think right now, especially in Saudi, everybody wants a piece. Everybody wants to get into the action of what's being built here, especially looking to 2034. As Mickey mentioned, all the opportunities and business opportunities are starting to build. Tourism, especially football. I believe in 10 years from now, as maybe you would say, there's this sports tourism that exists in certain countries and cities. You say, I want to go to London for many various of reasons, but you can also say, I want to go to London because I want to watch Chelsea and go to Stamford Bridge. So I think that's something that will happen here in Saudi. I want to go to this certain stadium and watch this specific team because that's what they're building around it. And that's what we want to be a part of for 2034.
Thank you. Now, we're very fortunate to be joined by Rasha Alkhamis from Roland Berger, who is going to speak to us about the situation here from the Saudi point of view. But I should also say, because I've just learned, not only is Rasha a champion of women's sport in Saudi, and she's been very involved in a number of sporting federations she'll speak about, she's also a very accomplished athlete and sports person herself. I think 4 Guinness World Records, no doubt she'll tell us about. So, Rasha, can you start by telling us about how sport has developed? Your own personal story and how sport has developed in the kingdom in the last few years.
Sure, definitely. Sure, definitely. So first of all, good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to share this stage with this well-esteemed panel, with a vibrant audience, and thank you so much, World Football Summit, for hosting me here today. I'll start by defining governance, and then I'll walk you through the evolvement of sports governance in Saudi Arabia. So governance is a framework that ensures accountability, transparency, and effective decisions and management in sports. Let's go before Vision 2030. So before Vision 2030, and let's take boxing as an example. So before Vision 2030, boxing was not a sport for women and girls in Saudi. Boxing was as well not accessible for fitness boxing or competition boxing. There are only 3 clubs that activated boxing in their facilities. Also, there was zero interaction with stakeholder ecosystem in the sports sector. But now we overcame this. And Vision, with the Ministry of Sports as a regulator of the sports sector and the custodian of the National Sports Strategy, where governance plays a major core pillar in their governance strategy house. The Olympic Committee is the promoter and the implementer of the sports sector, where they oversee more than 97 federations, as you've mentioned. Each federation are actually the promoter and the regulator of each sport. So you'd have boxing, kickboxing, soccer, all other sports. Some of them are Olympics, others are non-Olympics. But if you deep dive down into the national sports strategy, they have 12 subsector strategies and 12 cross-sectoral strategies. And each of these strategies actually ensures accountability, transparency across the sports ecosystem. So let's take as an example the Football Support Club. The Football Support Club ensures that it financially incentivizes the clubs to look and introduce 12 sports other beyond football, which means that boxing grew from 3 clubs to 83 clubs, where now the clubs are actually incentivizing the athletes to actually do boxing on a daily basis. Not only that, but also boxing participation grew by 300%. Between year 2021 to 2024, women boxing grew by 460%, which means that these strategies are ensuring accountability, transparency, and effective management. But I truly believe that now is the golden era of sports in Saudi Arabia. It is the best time to actually do investments and see the return of investments, giving the proper governance and ensure proper accountability.
So those of us living on the other side of the world in Europe or in the States see some of the biggest boxing fights now being organized in the Riyadh season. But what you're explaining to the audience, I think, is that that's just the tip of the iceberg. The growth of boxing as a sport in Saudi, not just bringing over foreign fighters, is something you're really seeing now. Is that right?
100%. So you can see that actually the investments and the enablers go beyond the strategies. So you'd have Saudi Games, as you've mentioned. So Saudi Games is incentivizing athletes to actually compete at the highest level, at a national level. You'd have the proper athlete pathway from school boys and girls to juniors, youth, and this whole athlete pathway back then, before Vision 2030, it was fragmented. But now you have a proper athlete pathway where it focuses on academies, it focuses on clubs, it focuses as well on how to go beyond the federation. It focuses on actually securing and increasing number of jobs in the kingdom. So how do you ensure that that the athlete, right after graduating or after retiring from his athlete career, would find a job in the ecosystem and would also contribute to the larger scale of the sports ecosystem?
And finally, Rasha, what are the main regulatory challenges for sport in Saudi at the moment, in your view?
So according to my challenges and what I've faced as a senior leader who I held and hold senior positions in the sports ecosystem, one is, let's say, more representation on international boards at a regional and international level. Before I joined the Boxing Federation, there was limited interaction with international organizations. Currently, I'm the VP of the Boxing Federation, a board of director on the Asian International. I'll tell you what I've learned from it. One is exchange of knowledge, sharing the same experience. How do you expedite your growth? Two is sports cultural dialogues, which helps you as well to widen your perspective. Three, hosting talent development courses in the kingdom for referees, for coaches. How do you develop your ecosystem with you as a federation? A second challenge that I've also faced is commercialization. Back then, the federations was fully reliant on government funds, and there was limited sponsorships, limited partnerships. It is up to the federation to drive these activities. How do you create more IPs? How do you create more events? Also, media rights. All of these were they're all under commercialization. A third element, which is a culture shift. How do you shift a culture which is around 36 million, 65% of it is actually youth, from a single sport where they can actually do different sports? And how do they accept combat sports? How do they practice it? How do you inspire them? So as you've mentioned, boxing as an event, all the growth actually happened right after Clash of the Dunes 2019. This happened where it inspired many of the youth to actually pick up boxing and to pick it up, to practice it, to compete, and now they're competing at the highest level.
Thank you. Jonny Gray from Ancora, you have been involved, worked and written recently about the importance of integrity and regulation in sport, including here in Saudi. First of all, why is integrity, governance and regulation, why is that so important for sport? Why do we need to spend time dealing with that?
Thank you, Nick. It's fantastic to be here in Riyadh and to see what's going on. It's incredibly exciting. I suppose my point would be, with enormous investment and activity in sport, one always has to have an eye on the underpinning governance of the risks associated with that, and in particular integrity risk, which I define for the purposes of this discussion as match fixing, doping and safeguarding. And without getting the right fundamentals in place to protect and enhance the growth of the sport and to safeguard the reputation of a country, be that Saudi or any other country, one runs the risk of things not quite playing out the way one hopes to. I'll just give you a brief example. In 2011, Xi Jinping, coming into power as the Premier of China, announced a policy that China would become a world superpower for soccer, for football, in 3 stages. Stage 1 was to compete in a World Cup, Stage 2 was to host a World Cup, and Stage 3 was to win a World Cup. And at the same time for the Chinese Super League to become one of the top leagues in the world. So how are we doing 14 years on from that? Well, it's not happened. It's not happened for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that the regulatory framework to protect the sport was not in place. So this year we've had announced that over 41 players have been convicted of match fixing, and match fixing involved 120 matches, 41 football clubs, and numerous officials across the sport. So that has completely ruined the reputation of Chinese football and set it back perhaps beyond before the original vision. So that is an apocryphal tale, if you like, Nick, of what happens if you don't get these things right.
And what do you think are the main things that need to be done, or what should be the focus to get that process and organisation in place to ensure integrity?
I think the first thing to understand is what are the risks? What are the challenges that a country like Saudi Arabia is going to face over the next 20 years? I think, I've talked about different areas. I would focus in on match fixing. When I was the regulator for world tennis, I spent quite a lot of time in Egypt trying to help the Egyptians understand that Sharm el-Sheikh had become the #1 match-fixing destination for the world in tennis. And it was challenging because sports betting is such a unfamiliar concept in Arab countries because it's not allowed. But if I take out my phone in the UK before I came here and I looked, I can bet on Division 2 Saudi football. I looked at Hajjar versus Al Jil, which may mean something to some in this room. I can put on contingencies, how many goals, who's going to score in the first half, what the outcomes are going to be. So the world is betting on Saudi sport. And especially at those slightly lower levels, that creates enormous vulnerabilities. So understanding what the challenges are, I think, is the next step, Nick. And then you might, if you want to ask me what you do next, I'm happy to talk about that.
Go ahead. What do you do?
Well,
how do we do it?
Once we understand this, I say, well, there's a top-down and there's a bottom-up approach. From top-down, I think Saudi's made enormous progress. The Anti-Corruption Commission, I think, has made enormous progress in the business side of sport. You obviously have a doping commission, but I would perhaps benchmark all of that against a country that is seen as being world leading in this area, and that would be Australia. Australia has a statutory body governing integrity risks in the sport, safeguarding doping. It has laws that make match fixing and other forms of competition manipulation illegal. It has a police force who are specially trained to investigate this. It has courts that can deal with these matters so that it's not left solely to the sport, who have limited jurisdiction in these areas, as you in particular will know, Nick. So I would benchmark against Australia, I would maybe benchmark against Spain, who are doing very well, and look at what the gaps are, and then let's fill those gaps. And then the second thing, bottom up, is I'd say, let's go through some scenario rehearsals. What happens if there is a match alert that the Al Jil Najjar, not this one that's played, but the next game, has suspicious betting about it? What are we going to do? Who is going to do that? What authority do they have? What happens if the people behind the match fixing are not players covered by the regulations of the Football Federation? How do the police get involved? How do you charge them and all these sorts of things? And going through these scenario testing along with getting all the governance right, I would say is the next thing that Saudi should perhaps think about, because this is coming. These are global dynamics, and it would be a shame if Saudi was not able to protect its investment.
And our final question to the whole panel, before I see if anyone in the audience has a question. Obviously, we're focusing on the future now, and the hopeful Saudi World Cup bid. 10 years' time, we may see the World Cup hosted here in Saudi Arabia. It'll be a very momentous occasion. How do each of you see the development of the sports industry in Saudi over the next 10 years? What are the most important opportunities, but also the most important challenges? Mickey first.
I think we probably need to be clear up front that there are some of my Saudi colleagues at work will tell you that Saudi Arabia are actually currently the world champions, having beaten Argentina in the opening round. So they consider themselves to be the world champions still. I'd look at it from sort of short, medium, long term. Short term, the future is really bright. There's an explosion in terms of investment for gyms, infrastructure, clubs that Rasha's been speaking about, participation from the youth. But these programs like, for example, Sport for All, which is a national program dealing with sort of lifestyle, health, obesity, diabetes, all those sort of things, Sport for All. There's a huge part for foreign investors to play into that. The Sports Boulevard is a program, for example, here in Riyadh, which is opening up green spaces for the residents of Riyadh. Same sort of things happening in East and Western Province as well. So short term, huge opportunities for local nationals, international investors, and so on to support that. And then in the mid-term, those backstops of the Asian Cup, Football Cup, and obviously the World Cup, inshallah, in 2034. and some of those youth hopefully will be who are just picking up the sort of participation now, either on the pitch playing potentially in a national team, or indeed being a referee or a coach at a club level and so on, being inspired by that. So those backstops of what's coming down the line, and then long term, you will hear the senior leadership in the country. Clearly, we all know about Vision 2030, but now talking about Vision 2050, 60, 70, and this is way over the horizon scanning from the strategic leadership. So the sustainability of the stadiums and the infrastructure that's going to be built, getting the regulation right, as has been said here by Jonny, making sure that Saudi is a place for international sports tourism, clubs coming back to play, those sort of things. So the future is super, super bright, and I'm great to be a part of it.
Pedro.
Well, I see Club America playing a friendly here in 10 years, at least. And that could happen against the national team or against any big club. I was just remembering while you were talking, actually, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, but Al-Qadisa just bought a player from Club America. So in that part of business, that's also starting to happen, right? They're starting to look also to the Mexican market for that sporting part. And no, besides that, I think geographically it's an enviable position for Saudi. I mean, being in between three continents, it just doesn't happen a lot. And with all this growth and being potentially a trade hub and specifically looking to sports and all the business opportunities that Mickey mentioned, I think that's going to be very valuable as well. And I think I mentioned it before, but that's really, I think that envisions some of the look for 2030 and beyond, is that I see it as a sports tourism destination, definitely. As saying I want to go to Riyadh because I want to watch this game and feel the experience in this incredible stadium. And I've never been to Riyadh before, and that has been the feeling from getting in the airport in this conference center. It's just all new, it's all impressive, it's all big, and that's not very usual, and that's something people are going to be looking to. So, yeah.
Rasha.
So I think there are multiple angles to look at it. One is from a commercialization perspective. So I think more IPs to be invested in, more media rights, more TV time, and all these type of activities. So commercialization. Privatization is also another topic to also look at. Privatization of stadiums, privatization of clubs, privatization of many activities. But another angle is, as you've mentioned, sports tourism. Now Saudi, Riyadh specifically, is hosting almost half of the stadiums in the kingdom. But these stadiums are actually not only a stadium, but it's also a sports city, such as Al-Qadiyah, where they actually have multiple facilities around it to host and cater for other sports to actually do their own sports. So an increase not only in football fan, but also an increase in other sports fans where they can actually start competing, hosting training camps and competition. I think last but not least is more from a governance perspective. So they're going to look at it from let's say governance structure. Who's the funder? So I think that will be very much clear. And then from another angle, which is governance delivery, who's doing what with a very clear definition of who's accountable, who's supporting, and so on and so forth. So there is very clear governance that will help in the rise of till the World Cup.
Thank you, Jonny.
Well, I think I've made it clear. I think my colleagues on the panel, it's an interesting panel because we're all coming at it from slightly different points of view. And I absolutely take all the points about sports tourism and the opportunities of the World Cup. I absolutely believe that's not the end of the story. I think we would see the Olympics here in due course and of course, all the other things that are going on. My hope is that Saudi becomes the world leader in sports integrity and that sponsors, investors, players and fans can come here with the confidence of what they're seeing as genuine sport. It's clean, it's the pure thing, and that there have been few or no reputational scandals, so that the reputation of Saudi as the world host of the greatest sporting events is unimpeachable, and that's what I would very much like to see, and I hope to be here to watch many of the sports myself as well.
Thank you. I know we have to wind up any second now, but does anyone have any burning questions that they want to put to the panel before we do? I might be able to see if you put your hand up. Nobody? Okay, well, can we just give a big round of applause to our very interesting and excellent panel. Thank you for listening.